My name's Joe, and I'm a Crystal Meth addict. Hey, don't stop giving money just because you're listening to me. You got to pay the rent. You know what I mean? Who's here for the first time tonight? One or two? Good deal. First of all, welcome, Speed Freak from Hell Alcoholic. And the other thing is that just as a matter of housekeeping, what we do here is a little different at Position of Neutrality. We do the instructions for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in Crystal Meth Anonymous. Why?
Because they work.
12 steps have already been proven that they work, and the original book of instruction in the 12 steps is Alcoholics Anonymous' book. But it was written 70 years ago by people who maybe talk differently than we do now. So what we have in this meeting, hopefully, is someone who can help translate it to you in my experience, the same as it was done for me. Someone showed me how to find my experience in this book. And so all we do at this meeting is try and show you how to find your experience in the book. I've got a fly that's going to be problematic.
It likes you.
Yeah, I know, and it's getting hot in here too. It get worse. Anyway, tonight we're going to look at steps 8 and 9. Those of you, if you just came in the first time, don't worry if you're not at that point in your development. The steps are all inclusive, so we'll reference back, and you'll catch up with us when we talk about the steps being all inclusive. As we go through, you'll see what we're talking about. The instructions for steps 8 and 9 start on page 76 of your book. Does everyone have a book? It really helps to have your own book. You don't want anyone reading your big book for you. You won't know if I'm lying to you if you aren't following along in the book. And the likelihood is sometime tonight I'll lie to you.
Good job.
Just to see if you're watching.
Right.
Okay, so page 76, middle of the page. Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Any of you recognize that reference?
Yes. Hear it all the time.
It's not by accident that's there. Remember, we've talked about it before. A faith that works, true religion, true spiritual growth, has two characteristics. One, it can be examined with your senses. It can be looked at logically, and it should make sense to you so you can enter into your decisions consciously. And two, it should be followed by signs and wonders. And that's not new knowledge, that's very old knowledge. We're not out looking for wonders, they're following us as the fellowship grows up around us. Does it make sense? The all-inclusive nature of the steps. So that's what they're talking about. Faith without works is dead. I have no faith that I don't take out and exercise. Does it make sense to you? Okay. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all the persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. How did we get that list?
Fourth step.
How many of you have made an inventory of your... Okay. So you have such a list now? And those of you that haven't done an inventory, the reason we do that inventory is to prepare us for this journey. To make sense? This is the freedom step. Step 9 is the freedom step. And it's entirely about the act of forgiveness, an end to judgment. Does it make sense? Because forgiveness means healing. So this instruction is in how I let go. That's what that meant. That's what forgiveness meant in ancient biblical teachings, was to let go. Aphesis. Huh? Okay. So, goes on to say, we made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. Did you hear what they said the step was about?
Reparation.
Have you heard, like on TV and things, that get the impression that people think that AA's 9th step is about saying you're sorry?
Oh, yeah.
You still get that impression sometimes even around the fellowship, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you see what they said it was about?
Making right.
Not about saying I'm sorry, admitting I'm wrong, and repairing that wrong to your satisfaction, not mine. Much higher standard. It's going to require a power greater than me. Because I'd rather be dead than wrong. Anyone? All right. I've proven it. All right? Okay, so We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to run on, or to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. So how many of you have not started on your amends and you're sitting around praying for willingness? The way it was suggested to me is ask for willingness and then act as if you have received it. It's not going to feel any better until you get to the other side. Does it make sense? Yep. Have you ever seen anyone do something that looked really courageous? You think, wow, that was brave. Did you then find yourself doing something similar and find out it didn't feel courageous as you were going through it? No. Because the experience of courage comes on the other side of facing fear. Do you notice that? Okay. So remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Who do we agree with?
God.
Ah, and where is God?
Deep down inside.
God is in you. So anywhere that God wants you to go, you should be okay to go as long as He's willing to go with you, right? So it's not a matter of, come on God, let's go. It's, Joe, wake up. God's here. Does that make sense? Okay. Probably there are still some misgivings. How many of you, looking at your list, you'll still have some misgivings? That means I'm not too sure about this shit yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Does it give you hope that this is a book of experience, the first 100, the first several thousand, and what they noticed is that all this pomp and flurry, there were still some misgivings. Whatever it is you're going through, I'm going through something else too. Right? We're all going through something all the time. Okay, as we look over a list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Anybody?
Yeah.
Well, we're in a CMA meeting. You guys had to have had some fairly nefarious business partners. Right? Okay, so that's a common experience too. So it says, let us be reassured. To some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. Yeah. Look at what they're talking to me about now. And remember, this is my book. I'm talking about what they suggest I should do, not what you should do. If I do what these people suggest, it won't matter what you do. But they're telling me that this approach is just my first approach, and my focus should be on them. Does it make sense? This isn't freedom for me. This is how do I achieve freedom for them. How many of you spend a lot of time working out the script for your approach? That's not a bad idea to develop the courage to do it, but that's not where the power of the amends is. The amends is not the approach. There's going to be numerous approaches, and then there's going to be an ongoing life amending, behaving in the way they ask you to treat them going forward, right? Okay. So at the moment we're trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. How many of you felt like you were living a life that lacked purpose? How many of you suspected your addiction was going to give you a life of purpose? Some of us didn't suspect that, but it's a fact, isn't it?
We used with a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, I used with a purpose, absolutely. And when I was looking for it, because I was out, I had a real sense of purpose, right? And it's the same thing, just a 180, right? Okay. All right, so it's seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we've gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. Did you notice the experiential fear in that? I at first don't want to tell you God did this for me because I'm afraid of what you'll think about me professing God. Any of you relate to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then once I get past that, because I remember I asked God to take away my difficulties, and in exchange I would bear witness of what He'd done for me of His power. I started thinking I ought to keep that since I'm still remaining sober, although I'm often an ass. So I got to thinking maybe I ought to profess it, and then I realized the reason I didn't go blabbing that is because other people have prejudice too. And I need to take a minute and see how I can be most effective in carrying this message. Because they may not understand me, but they will feel me if I speak to them with empathy and compassion. Yeah? Okay. So it says, our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. What might that look like? Well, if I stole from them, I'd be back to admit I stole from them and work out a payment plan or return their stuff. Right? That kind of thing. Okay. He's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. You understand what they're saying?
Yeah, show me the money.
Yeah, just... I was out there looking for God, and I'm doing better now. Sorry about your stereo. While you're out there looking for God, did you happen to find my fucking stereo? And then we just hand over the stereo. And then they have a spiritual discovery. Okay. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we're willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. You guys starting to learn how to do that? When you start realizing that we are inexplicably different? You know, remember Bill's description in his story of Ebby showing up and he's used to seeing him drunk and Ebby's worse than him and he was fresh-skinned and glowing. You guys know what he's talking about, that experience? Remember when people thought you were inexplicably different? Man. Okay. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. Any of you got one of those? How many of you hate the word hate? I mean strongly dislike. You got one now? Okay, most of us do. Okay. It may be he's done us more harm than we've done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we're still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. What do they mean by that?
Take control. Take the lead.
Yeah, take control of the situation. Because when the horse gets their bit in the teeth, you're going where the horse wants to go. So they want us to take the lead. Instead of sitting around hoping that you'll run into them at an opportune moment, seek them out, make it right. Does that make sense? Okay. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. Now that's their experience. How many of you had one that you were absolutely certain when you went to them and admitted what had happened, they were going to humiliate you?
Yeah.
I already did that.
You have one of those? I can't tell you what your experience is, but see if you relate to me. When I went to that guy, at the moment I admitted it, I realized when I did that to him, I humiliated me. And when I took ownership of that act, it changed to humility. And the hatred I had for that man, I was filled with love. It was gone. Any of you had a similar experience? I don't produce those. Do you? Me? No. That just happens because of what they suggest. Okay? We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. Guys, this helps to have sponsorship. They want me in a helpful and forgiving spirit. Now, I've had people coming to me thinking they were making amends, and they've said things like, well, I guess I need to make amends to you. And I said, why is that? And I said, well, because I think you're an ass. And I didn't know they thought I was an ass. So I didn't receive it as helpful. Does that make sense? Matter of fact, I'm still not too fond of them either. The point of the matter is that what I need to do, what that man showed me, is that I need to go to them in a forgiving spirit. How would I like to be approached if the roles were reversed? I know what happened in that relationship. They don't know what I thought at them. They know what my actions showed. So in the case of my family, I didn't go around them because I didn't want to embarrass them by my behavior. But they thought it was because I was blaming them. So I gave them the freedom to understand me a little better when I went back and said, the reason I didn't come around is because of my respect for you. But I now see that it was wrong to treat you that way. See what I'm saying? It's a little different. But I had to get centered in the spirit to get that kind of experience. So it helps to have some sponsorship to walk you through it. It just does. When we try and do this on our own, we usually hose it. And then we have another process of inventorying that and making amends for the amends we made. Okay? So, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell them we'll never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. We're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. I had to internalize that as mine. I got to realize that first of all, I need their permission. I can't go bullying into their life. And I'm not going to be the guy I hope to be until I've done my very best to set it right, but on their terms, not mine. And I have to internalize that instruction. And I still hear people saying, man, I need to make amends. You ready to hear it? Yeah. Man, I ain't even ready to look at you, right? So we got to remember what we're about now. You know what I mean? I'm just telling you what it looks like for me. Okay? His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. Here's a promise and a condition. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. How many of you have gone to make amends, walked away less than gratified? Did you know we had a precise set of instructions? And so, okay, then where was I not calm or frank? Or was I not direct? Or was I just not open to further criticism?
Selfish and motive.
Well, sometimes they floor me with something new, and I think I made such a gigantic spiritual stretch to reach out to them, but I wasn't open to all the other crap they had for me. And it wasn't unreal. It was real. The reason it had power over me, the reason it stirred within me is I really did that. I just wasn't ready to deal with it. So I thought. But what's God's will?
Whatever's going on.
Whatever's going on. So I got a bonus. So I needed sponsorship to call and say, they hurt my feelings. You said, really? Let's talk about it. And then once we talked about it, I realized that I really received a spiritual gift. Does that make sense to you? Okay. All right. So in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. How many of you have internalized that?
Yeah.
How many of you have avoided amends because you got 14,000 scenarios of the way it can turn out, and none of them are good? 90% of them are false, and they're by their experience, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own faults, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Again, remember this is a first approach. So sometimes, like, I've got kids that still won't talk to me. I don't know when they might. They still have an old drunken dad. And we talked about that a little last week. I got a lot of young men and women who look up to me today, and I can parent them or brother to them or whatever I have to do until, because they're all God's kids. And God gets to pick them, not me. Does that make sense? Well, it'll work out. It'll just be fine. Okay? All right. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we're doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they'll offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. Most alcoholics owe money.
No way.
These guys are masters of understatement. Any of you get here on a winning streak? Anybody get here not owing money? Man, I want to meet you. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we're trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Did you guys have that discovery?
Oh, hell yeah.
When you finally realized that you weren't fooling anyone and started copping to it, it gave them a little sense of relief.
Yeah.
Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory that it may cause financial harm. Now, guys, they're not talking about running out and blathering to everyone you see that you're an alcoholic or you're an addict. They're saying, don't be afraid that the fact that I'm disclosing it to those people I harmed is going to harm me further. The reason I didn't pay the rent to you is I spent it on dope. That was wrong of me. They know it anyway. They cleaned it out after they evicted me. See what I'm saying? Okay. None of the rest of you guys did that? Yeah. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we're sorry. How are we going to let them know?
Actions.
Going to show up with a payment or a plan or a payment and a plan, right? And whatever else they want. And it's going to take a power greater than me because sometimes it's scary. Okay? Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we're liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. Perhaps we've committed a criminal offense. Perhaps. We know who the tweakers are. which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We've already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we're divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up alimony to number one. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. They're just trying to give us some generalities. If you got here with back child support, if you got here with old court fines, if you got here with anything, they all fit in. All they're saying is that kind of stuff weighs on us. If I won't face it, then I don't believe that the power in me can overcome the world. And for me, if that power in me doesn't overcome the world, I'll drink again. Any of you had that experience? The fear is crushing. How many of you have been sober long enough now to know that we really have a fear problem?
Oh, yeah.
And it's power greater than me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Would you like to have the general principles?
Of course.
Does that make it easy? Make it simple for us block-headed fellas, right? Yeah. Reminding ourselves that we've decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. So, that's the first thing they want me to do. I can go anywhere that God's willing to go with me. Yes?
Yes.
And I know that because of my recovery and yours. Does it make sense to you? Yep. Okay. So I remind myself of that, and then I say a prayer that I be given the strength and direction to do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. That's what they said. This isn't me telling you what you must do. This was their experience. They were alcoholics of the hopeless variety. They, like me, knew if I didn't face those fears, I was going to jail anyway. And that may be the best place I go. That's all. And it's always experiential. You either believe it or you don't. What's the first step in recovery?
Fully
Concede to your innermost self.
We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves. When does that experience occur? Moment by moment. So when I won't go face this amend, I haven't fully conceded. Does that make sense? And then I'm back to step one. Through every form of self-deception and experimentation, I'll try and prove myself an exception to the rule. Therefore, non-alcoholic. Make sense? Because it's not for drunk people trying to get sober. It's for sober people trying to stay sober. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Usually, however, other people are involved. Now, this is where they're going to talk to us about the others in that step.
Right.
It talks about me. It talks about the people I've harmed. Then it talks about others. Like there's 3 columns, right?
Right.
And there are people that will tell us, you are others.
Oh, no.
No. You are you. And others are others. And they're going to tell us specifically. Don't take my word for it. Look at what they say. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we're not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. Did you understand what they're telling you who the others are? The other people that are on this train wreck with me. Maybe the people that are there trying to pick up the pieces with me, and now I've got to go out and make restitution, and they're going to have to, whether they like it or not, they're dependent on me financially or emotionally, and they're going through everything I'm going through. You guys got any of those? So I need their permission. I need to tell them that for my spiritual growth to overcome my condition, I'm going to have to go out and do this, and it's going to make us a little short in our accounts, and, you know, is it all right with you if I do that? It helps to have their support. Does it make sense? Okay. A man we know had remarried because of resentment and drinking. He'd not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he'd walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. See what his thought process is? He's kind of freaking out, but he's talking to people and they're looking at it and looking at, you know, not only do you owe those people over there, but you got to take care of who you're working with here, and you got an employer now that is depending on you, and maybe we ought to take a look at this whole situation. Does that make sense? That always helps to have someone who's not caught in the middle of the experience to give us a different perspective. Not to tell us what to do, but to give us a different set of eyes, given that my insanity is a lack of perspective. Any of you ever gone insane with your lack of perspective? Inability to think clearly?
Oh.
You don't have to take a drink to get crazy,
Oh,
right?
No.
Okay. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and he also sent a small amount of money. What do you think she was most impressed with?
The money.
None of it hurt,
Nope.
but money probably spoke loudly. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. He told her what he would try and do in the future. He was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not. The whole situation has long since been adjusted. Think about what he did so you get an idea what any links might look like for you. He sent the money. He got permission from the family and the employer at home. He sent the money to her. Told her he was wrong. Hoped she would forgive him someday. And I'm willing to surrender myself to the courts if you insist. Wow. That's what any links might look like. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Okay. So now they got some principles again. Before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. I need their permission to drag them through anymore. Okay? If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. So there you go. I've got permission, I've got support, God's with me, go. Does that make sense? Ask for willingness, act as if. It's kind of spooky, isn't it? It's a demonstration of faith. That's all it is. And it's you don't have to do a damn thing in AA if you don't want to. But if you want to get what they got, that's what they did. Does that make sense? Okay. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as the basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. So the dude took the money for this cat and said he didn't get it after he was questioned about it. And we don't ever really learn, I'll tell you the rest of the story as we go through it, but we don't ever really learn what he did with the money, but we know he was a bit of a drinker. And you know how money can dissipate. Any of you? Any of you ever have that discovery of dissipating money? It's kind of embarrassing how that's done. Okay. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? When they ask a question mark in here, they put a question mark, they're asking a question I want to ask of me. So as I'm going out to make amends, that preparation of meditation is now, what right do I have to involve those other people dependent upon me? None without their permission, right? So now I know the next step's indicated. See what I'm saying? Okay, I'm going to have to get their permission. So then it says, how could he possibly make a statement exonerating his rival? Well, that would require I put myself in his position. What did I do to him? Who did I involve in this matter? Does that make sense? So that he could get guidance on how he would like to be approached if the roles were reversed. Okay? You might recognize this as do unto others. Okay? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. So in case you haven't ever heard this explanation, this guy was an Oxford group member. They don't give us a name because he never joined AA, the fellowship. He stayed with the Oxford groups and he went on and did whatever he did. And there were a lot of them that did that in those days. But what this guy had done is this guy had given him money to donate to the church congregation. And however he had gone and pissed it away, and he didn't have it. He didn't want to embarrass his employer, and he didn't want to embarrass his family, so he just ruined his friend's reputation. Said he never received it. So he had involved in this fraud, he'd involved the entire congregation of the church, and he hadn't gone back to the church in many years. Because he was afraid to go back because of what he had done to him. So think about the power that's going to be required to walk back into that church, step to the front of that congregation, and admit to them what you did. That's what any links looks like. Some of you are feeling that. That's the experience. And they're trying to give us examples of that kind of behavior. We know it's hard. That's what they're saying over and over. Do not be discouraged. But there's a big experience on the other side. Does that make sense? Now he can go to church. He can go anywhere a free man because he took care of that one little thing. Huh? Okay, the chances are that we have domestic troubles. Anybody? Anybody who's ever had a domestic has domestic trouble. How many of you live all alone still have domestic troubles? Okay. Common experience. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. Anybody? And you women, you may be mixed up with something too. Who knows?
Heck yeah.
Okay, we doubt that if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people, but drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. Did you discover that?
Yeah.
Just a little.
Those of you that had a home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? Again, they've got a question mark. They want me to... Instead of just focusing on the terrible energy that she's putting out toward me, I need to ask myself, how could she be anything else given the way I have treated her? And that's true with almost everyone in my life. Complete disregard for how anyone else could possibly have felt because I had to have the next one. Anyone else live like me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the question is, how could she be anything else? I got to get on the other side of it. It helps sometimes if you guys are in this process to read that chapter to the wives and see what it looks like from another set of eyes. Okay, the husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. Now they're describing us as the active alcoholic, whether wife or husband or whatever. We start feeling sorry for ourselves because of the negative energy we're getting at home. And then it says he commences to look around the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Any of you ever do that?
Yes. Okay.
Perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. Any of you met her? In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? Again, another question mark. Any of you get mixed up in something you knew after you'd started that it wasn't a good thing to get mixed up in, and then you start, well, now what am I going to do? Maybe this will just go away. See, this is a book of experience. They're doing the same thing. They're going through the same mental masturbation. Okay. A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times. Is that true?
Yeah.
Men or women? Have you behaved in a way you wish you hadn't behaved and then didn't know how to extricate yourself from it? And you felt remorseful at times? And then you took a look at him and said, ah, fuck him. And then went and did it. That's what they're talking about. Trying to humanize it, okay? Okay, especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who's literally gone through hell for him. We put them through a lot, don't they? Whether it's a parent or a wife or a husband or whatever it is, we put them through a lot. Okay? Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. That's their experience. They're not talking to you. They're saying, we've tried to avoid it, and we had to do something about it. That make sense? Okay. If we're sure our wife does not know, should we tell her?
No.
How sure are we?
Just leave it at
Is it convenient that I'm sure? Or is it true that I'm sure? Okay, not always, we think. See, these aren't questions for me to answer for you. You're the only one that knows what that relationship looks like. You're the only one that knows what your behavior has been like. You're the only one that knows that. You're going to have to measure it, and the answer is going to come from within you. Does that make sense? You're going to know. Okay, then it goes on to say, if she knows in a general way that we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? No. Opinions coming out everywhere. Is that based on experience, or how many of you have gotten it?
But it turns out I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's valid because you went to how would you like to be approached? How many of you insisted on knowing the details, got the details, and thought, boy, that really sucked. Yeah, I didn't really need to know the details, did I? Yeah. So they don't really need to know the details. They need to know I was wrong. Yeah. Right. Okay. Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She'll want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. Now they're going to talk about the experience, how they feel they should act, how their mind works, and how they ultimately act and what they discovered as a result. Does that make sense? So follow their logic. We're sorry for, we feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We're sorry for what we've done, and God willing it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. It's a matter of, I was wrong to do that with you. I can't disclose to you who they are and where they are because that's not going to be useful. That's what they felt they should do. And then they got in their head and they said, though there may be justifiable exceptions, because it sounds like she knows anyway, so I'll go ahead and give her the name. Anybody know what they're talking about? There may be justifiable exceptions. And though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we've often found this the best course to take. How many of you discovered the best course to take was to say I have no right to go further because you blathered out those justifiable exceptions? Am I the only one that did that?
No, I did.
Okay. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It's as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. I would recommend to you, not point that out to her. Or him. We're never going to tell them what they should do. Or go ahead and have your experience with it. But they generally don't receive it well. It's better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. We're laughing about it, but what happened to me in actual practice, I had a justifiable exception. So I named the person, and she knew the person. And so for no real reason, her anger shifted from me to that person. And the issue never got resolved between any of us. So I've got some harms that I can't even approach to make right yet. Make sense? So, but do it any way you want, because it makes a hell of a nice story. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. Who's an outsider?
Anyone else?
Anyone that's not involved in that intimate relationship. We might talk to people for guidance, but we've got to go to the power within. We're the only ones that know, and that's the power we're trying to strengthen anyway. Make sense? Okay. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we're dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than to risk face-to-face combat. Do you understand the language, the metaphor they're using there? Basically, all they're trying to tell me is that I am not there in the house to make peace. I'm there to be peace. And they probably have a justifiable reason for their jealousy based on my past acts. And so I don't need to tell them how they should think or feel. Any of you ever been told how you should think or feel? Did you experience it as helpful?
Nope.
No.
So no one else does either. And all they're saying is, remember there's a power in you. The power to love them through anything is in you. Does that make sense? And remember that the power who sustains us is love. Right? Love. God loved first. Make sense? He loved me when I was unlovely, and He will love through me to them till I can make right my wrongs. Does that make sense to you? That's an experience. Okay. If we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. You ever hear that?
All the time.
How many of you have said that?
Oh, okay.
It's almost a regurgitated response. How you doing today? Well, at least I'm sober.
Yeah.
That's the freaking floor, man.
If I could do that, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean that is the absolute floor. We got a life of purpose. We got to take the faith out for a walk. Regardless of what we're going through, we've got to be that beacon of light. That's what we're called to be. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So of course we're going to stay sober.
Right.
Because I ain't going to do shit if I don't.
Yep.
Okay? Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he's yet a long way from making good to his wife or parents, whom for years he's so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have had no homes today or would perhaps be dead. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. You guys have relationships that were dead in your life that have come back to life?
Yes.
Have you started to learn through this process that resurrection's not a theory?
Yes.
All those things people have been teaching us all our life that made no sense, but we see people get up. We see relationships spring up around us. Have you had that experience?
Yep.
And I don't create those. I guarantee you. That's not me, man. I hose it. But the power in me creates. Does that make sense? Okay. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. Ask yourself what they're talking about, because we hear that a lot. You can get indoctrinated. Well, I'm sober. At least he's sober. Well, he's miserable.
Right.
Maybe you should drink. Maybe you get more pleasant.
Right.
Not being ugly, just trying to, truthfully. If sobriety were enough for me, how come every time I got sober I needed to get drunk again? Any of you had that experience?
Yeah.
Not one little drink, not one little hit, not even a little cocaine holiday at Thanksgiving, nothing. Then I turned up spun like a monkey. How'd that happen? If sobriety was enough. So that would be unthinking of me, wouldn't it? I'm going to have to, my problem's a little deeper, that's all. Okay. He's like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma, ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Any of you ruined the whole house?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we still got money for breakfast. That's cool. A 40 and a rock.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweep up around the dumpster, we'll go. Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. So here we go. I got a long period of reconstruction ahead, and it's my job to go seek out that recovery experience. Yeah? A remorseful mumbling that we're sorry won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Guys, you might recognize that reference, you might not recognize that reference, but I will promise you a better day if you'll take their suggestion. Ask each morning, regardless of who you're living with, ask that your Creator, the power within you, show you the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. And then remember, your responsibility the rest of the day is to look for that way in every situation. And I dare you not to have a better day. Does it make sense? Where do we find God?
Deep down inside.
In every man, woman, and child. How do we find Him?
Searching fearlessly.
Sometimes we have to search fearlessly. So when my human kicks in and I see selfish, dishonest, right? Fear, whatever, I need to remind myself, no, remove the fear, show me. Does that make sense? In every situation. Okay. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to work it because we're worth it. Is that what it says?
We have to live it.
That's not what it says. We ain't a cheer squad and we don't treat hangnails. If you belong here, you have the deadly disease of addiction. And it would be better if you weren't running the cheer squad and realize that this is a manner of living. This works if I live it. If I pretend to live it, I pretend it works. How many of you have pretended your diet was working and then went home and ate a cake? I don't know why I can't lose weight. Just say it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. That's a big problem. For those of you that are new, or those of you like me, been at it a while, but we still got people that we really hurt, they'll change in time. In the meantime, God's got a lot of people for me to reach out and touch. Yeah. And I can't be so caught up in my selfish obsession that I need them to change the way they look at me. I need to change the way I look at me. I got to live for God's purpose instead of have God live for my purpose. Does that make sense? And I got to do it for my own sake. because it's real uncomfortable when I don't.
Yeah.
Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness will make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. One thought, the big amends that people might not have told you about, the one I make to the universe is going out and touching people just like me and allowing the healing power of God to flow through me and get them up walking, and that fellowship grows up about us and extended families. And so those things you don't think you can ever make right, God's going to put exactly the right people in your life. How many of you guys knew Black Wally? Any of you know him or have heard the legend of him?
Yes.
That guy carried me around, did wonderful things for me for years and years and years, and I was such an ass, and I didn't ever really show much respect. And one day when I finally had been touched with this experience, I'm sitting down and I'm going through the steps with a young man, and as I'm going through the steps, many times I had thought about the way I treated Wally, and he had passed since then, and as I'm going through the steps, I discovered that this young man is Black Wally's grandson.
Oh, perfect.
Wow.
You guys feel that?
Wow.
Okay, so if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. What phase?
Amen.
Getting started on admitting I'm wrong, because that's where the strength comes. Huh? Okay. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. What's new mean?
Never experienced.
It's going to be different. It's not going to be just freedom from my addiction. It's going to be freedom from me.
From bondage.
And once I'm free from me, I'm free to be me. That's really a new freedom. Any of you relate to what I'm talking about?
Yep.
How many of you feel a little stirring in you and don't even know why? Yeah, spirit recognizes spirit. We'll feel it before we know it.
Yep.
Okay? We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Makes sense, doesn't it? If I'm going out and facing the past and I'm converting that past experience into a helpful experience, then why would I regret it?
Nope.
Does it make sense? And if you are regretting the past, it's because you got some amends to make. Because this is your book. This is a very simple operations manual for a very complex machine, the human. So anytime I'm not receiving those promises, I just got to go back from there to find out what it is. I need to inventory it and go make some amends. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. How do I know peace?
I'm going to experience
I'm going to have to experience it. It's a sensory experience. You notice how all of this is describing a sensory experience? No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. You will if you take your faith for a walk. If you don't take your faith for a walk, you may not see that. And it's entirely up to you. This faith likes to go out for a walk. That's all I can tell you.
You may regret the past, but you see how it can benefit others.
Yep, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. How many of you have had that experience?
Oh, yeah.
Was it sudden for you too? And it's an experience. If you guys haven't had it, guys, this isn't words on a wall. It's really an experience. Are these extravagant promises?
Yes, they are.
We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Thanks, Nick.